Shop of Hard Knocks, and you're watching part 2 of the Doubleneck build series using MGB guitars 6-string neck lengths. The second part of this video is going to be about how to lay out the components on the guitar, how to construct wiring channels so you can get things from here to the output and all across the face of the guitar, where to lay the controls out, etc. Okay, so the first thing you got to do is choose the pickups, the bridge, the tailpiece, and basically what type of controls you're going to use. And that's the hard part, because that's a very personal thing, and that's something that maybe you have in mind specifically for your build. For this build, however, I'm going to use a really cool humbucker that is made by MGB guitars called the box bucker. And it's a surface mount, super flat, super thin humbucker guitar pickup. And it's just something that I thought really looks cool, and it sounds really cool. It's kind of reminiscent to me of a gold foil, kind of a lo-fi, snarly mid-range thing. Not a lot of output, so it's got a lot of articulation and clarity to it. And it's a really cool pickup, believe me. So what I'm going to do with this guitar is lay out 3 box bucker pickups on each neck. I'm going to use a tunematic tailpiece, and on the 12-string neck it's actually got 12 individually intonatable bridge sections to it. So it's a tunematic with 12 bridge saddles, and then a tunematic with 6 roller bridge saddles on the 6-string side, and then just a screw-on slotted stop tailpiece. And then for controls, this is something, it's an aesthetic of mine that I personally like, but I don't love guitars that have knobs and controls everywhere. I like simplicity of design and a clean layout. So for the electronics on this guitar, I'm going to have 2 5-way switches controlling the pickups on all 3 pickups. So it'll be much like a Stratocaster in terms of your pickup selector switch. And then I'm going to have a master tone and volume for each one. And then possibly I either may have a push-pull switch, on-off switch on the tone controls to control each neck, or I may just put a separate toggle switch in on each neck as well. So that's kind of the layout. We're going to do a edge mount jack here, and let's just get started. The first order of business is to get a shallow swimming pool route done for these 3 pickups. And the reason is number one is that they're designed to be flush mount on a cigar box style guitar, but there's not enough clearance if you put these flush on the surface of the guitar for the strings to clear them. Plus I want some degree of adjustability up and down as well, so we're going to mount them on springs, much like a Telecaster neck pickup is done. So what I did was I measured out 3 of these in a row and got the dimensions for that, and then created a routing frame for it and put a plexiglass top on it. And there you go. It's very basic and simple. It's just a frame that's actually got a hole in it the exact size that I need so that a flush trim router bit can run this. The only thing is that I wanted to make it really stable, so I extended the routing table that the router will rest on all the way out to here. And if you notice, the fingerboards protrude up above the section of the body there. So I had to leave some relief in this middle cross section here. As you can see, it's kind of curved a little bit to accommodate the radius of that. And then I said just got a flat piece of plexiglass on top, and how it works is this will lay straight on top of the guitar. It rides over the neck right here, but it's got a completely flat, wide surface from a router to do its magic. You attach this to the guitar top with double stick tape, pop it up, and if you notice I cut a little bit of relief right here because there's where your bottom neck fits in right there. So there is 3 pickups routed in about, I'd say I'm going to use about 1/4 of an inch deep well, and then that'll give me the exact amount of adjustability I need to optimize each pickup's location. So the next thing I'm going to do is attach some double stick tape, position this accurately, lay it down, and then I'm going to use a flush trim router bit to go ahead and cut my cavities for both sides of this. So now that we've got the swimming pool cavities routed out for the 3 pickups that are going to be arrayed here, now we got to concentrate on getting the wires from point A to point B to point C to point D and out. And that requires a little bit of stealth. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to route 2 lengthwise 1/4-inch channels towards the bottom edge of each pickup swimming pool route. And that is where the wires come out of the bottom of the pickup itself. And that's just going to lay down flat in that little channel and allow the pickup covers to still stay flat on top of the mounting surface. And we're going to route that all the way down to this bottom edge here on both channels, both cavities. And then we will drill through from that channel through to the control cavities that we've already routed in from the back. Okay, so we can go from here to here, to the center control cavity, and then from there to the lower pickup cavity, and then from there to the lower control cavity, and then there to the output jack. And we've got a flow of wires without any major routing or cover plates on the front. We want it to look really crisp and clean. So I'm going to go ahead and get this set up, and we're going to start doing some routing so that we can hide these wires really nicely. And it's going to be a pretty cool experience. So as you can see, I've routed the wiring access channels within the outer perimeter of the pickup cavities. So now when you put the pickup in, it fits perfectly, and when it's in place, voila, no wiring channels. And everything looks completely flush and clean. How's that for a fit? Okay, so now we've got our wiring channels routed, our pickup cavities routed, and then from the back side we've got our control cavities routed. Now we need to connect all these together, and this is a great way to do that. I've got a Forstner bit, a 1/2 inch, that matches the routes, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill probably 1/4 inch deep holes at the end of each one of these routes, and that'll help me get more parallel to the surface, because you don't want to go in at a too steep an angle and bust through the back. You want to come out right in the middle of that cavity, which requires a fairly shallow angle. So getting a little bit more purchase, getting a little bit deeper in there allows you to get that bit just a little more flatter to the surface. So I'm just going to take this real easy and just do it by hand. And there, that's all I'm going to do. And then I'll go back to the top. And do the same thing there, and then the last one will be up here. And there you go. So what I'm going to do now is round off any sharp corners to the wiring runs so that they're not wear points for the wires as they run through these in use. So I'm going to take a really sharp chisel and I'm just merely going to cut this at a rounded angle. Like I said, the chisel's really sharp, so you can see we've got a nice curved edge right there for the wires leading in. And then for the wires coming out, once again, it's going to be the same thing. I'm basically just going to take a really sharp chisel take that down and put a nice little curve on that edge. And then once again, on this wiring channel here, I'm going to do the same thing. There. So I've got a really nice rounded edges there, and there too. So I shouldn't have any pinch points on the wiring. So this is the 5-way switch that we're going to put into the cavity this way. Okay. If you notice, you got about a 1/4 of an inch clearance from the edge of that. So what I'm going to do is mark this first hole right here, and I'm going to mark it on the inside and then drill through that and then flip it over, and that'll be the pilot line, so to speak, for me to use a template, which is basically this Telecaster control plate, you know, to mark out. That'll be the hole that's drilled through right there. And then I can mark out the slot and the other hole on the top, cut them all, and then start drilling holes for the controls and switches on this end. So that's the plan, and this is what I'm going to do. Basically, is just mark a center dot about, I'm going to go 3/8 of an inch just to give me a little bit of a edge there, and then I'm going to drill it. And then there's the hole right there. So now that I've got that awl or center punch in the hole that's for the first screw, I'll just merely make this parallel with the lines I'd already drawn out, and then I can mark the slot that needs to be cut as well as the second hole. And then go ahead and mark the potentiometer locations, and voila. Have to just drill these out. Just going to have to cut this out, drill this out, and then there will be our first control layout. Then I'll replicate this on this same patch right here, doing the same procedure. Flip it back over, drill the first hole for the screw mount on the 5-way switch, come back here and line it up on the template, and mark everything and drill it. So I made a template of the layout of each control panel with the pots and the jack and the switches, and then I made an aluminum shield out of this, and this is going to lay in between the controls and the body, interior bottom of the cavity, which is the body itself. So all I'm doing right now is just taking a needle file and kind of squaring up this slot. I took a Dremel tool with a cutting wheel and cut a slot there first, and then used this file to square up the edges and make everything nice and neat looking. Then after this is completely filed and cleaned up slot wise, then I'll go ahead and flat sand both sides of this and polish it up really nice. I know it's probably nothing that you would ever see, but to me little details like this, they're very important, and that's what makes a custom-built guitar a custom-built guitar. All right, so here's a tip, or this is how I locate and place the bridge. That's the most critical part of this operation, because with the bridge too far away or too close to the nut, the guitar will never play in tune. But the first thing we got to do is mount the tail pieces, because that's what holds the strings on. And then the bridge kind of positions the string forward and a little bit sideways. And it's a lot easier to get the bridge positioned properly, but when the tailpiece is on as well. Now I'm using these screw-on slotted style tailpieces. I've got a 6-string and a 12-string version. I'll go ahead and show you how I mark these out. Basically, I've determined that I need about 3.5 inches from the end of the pickup to the tailpiece. And then the Tune-o-matic 12-string will be somewhere along this line right here, and then the tailpiece will be back here. And then we've got a little bit of after string here to help with the the tension and the feel of that. So the first thing I'm going to do is mark a line 3.5 inches from the edge of the routed pickup cavity, and then take a square and line it up along the maple edge, which is the exact true orientation of the neck there, and draw a square line. So I've got a line there at 3.5 inches, and I repeated that on this process here. Okay, so there is where I know my tailpiece is going to be. That's where it's going. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take one screw and I'm going to put that where it needs to be on this. And then from there, I'm going to string it up, going to install one tuner and line up a string along this edge with the bridge. And then after I tune that up, that one string up, I'll check the intonation literally on that one string and slide this back and forth until it's exactly perfect on the tuner. And then there is where I know my string bridge should be located. So that's the game plan, and I'll show you how we move forward from there. We've got the tailpiece tacked on temporarily, as well as a single tuner, the outer or lowest E string. And this is our 12-string Tune-o-matic bridge. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and place it under here in about the right position I think it's going to be. And then I'm going to just tune this up to the nearest whole note. Okay, so then I'm going to check the intonation here, and that's sharp. The fretted note is sharp against the open note or the harmonic, which are the same thing. So that means that the bridge needs to be placed back a little. So I'm just going to slide it back probably to about right here, and then we'll see where we're at. Okay, that's dead on there, and dead on there. Okay, intonation checks out perfectly. Okay, that's where the bridge goes. To me, it's as simple as that. You know, and if you line up this outside string perfectly, then the other strings will be exactly spaced where they need to be. And you've got the exact placement forward and backwards so that the intonation is going to be right. Remember to slightly angle the treble side of the tunematic, just the slightest little bit, to take into account any extra compensation that is going to be required from the lighter or the treble strings. So you don't want it exactly square, but almost close to it. All right, we're good to go. And what I'm going to do now is mark this out, and then I'm going to take a 5/8 inch router bit, and I'm going to set the tunematic into the top about 1/8 of an inch. Once again, the reason is because with these necks, there's not enough clearance for a tunematic style or a bigger, taller bridge. Like with a screw-on flat Stratocaster or Telecaster style bridge, you've got enough clearance on the neck. But for a tunematic, it's a little bit different. So we're going to go ahead and change that out as well. So I've got to mark the bridge now with the location that I need. And then I'll just center it and mark the holes on the maple strip once I get everything off here, and then we'll set up a router jig with the 5/8 inch router bit, and we'll go ahead and route a channel 1/8 inch deep in it, and then we will mount the two studs that go on or in the body on either side, and that's what the bridge mounts on top of. And there you go. Piece of cake, huh? Not that hard. Just take your time. Make sure that you always work along the inside maple edge of the neck blanks, because that is your true line for the neck. So anything that falls parallel with that is going to be parallel to the fingerboard and fretboard, which is what you want. Okay, we've got the recess cut out for the tunematic bridge. Now, if you'll notice on the tunematic, you've got a flat side, and then on the other flat side, you actually have some protuberances, which are the set screws that control the intonation adjustments. So the holes for the mounting studs for the tunematic are not exactly centered within this route. They're actually positioned more towards the top, so that when you put the bridge in, the flat side will be against the flat side here, but you'll have room down here for screw adjustments if the bridge is going to be less than flush with the surface. In other words, if the bridge is set a little below the surface, you got to have a little room for the screwdriver to get into it. So I'm going to do a little bit of light sanding on this cavity here, but that looks really good. And then that's for the 12-string side, and we're just going to merely repeat the same process again for the 6-string side. You know, it's no mystery there. And once again, the mounting studs go down in here like this, and we're actually going to mill these down just a little bit on the outside so that they'll clear the interior holes a little bit better. But everything's looking really good, and we are well on the way to having a 12-string tunematic bridge in the family. All right, now that I've got the recesses routed for each one of the bridges, the last bit of finagling I've got to do is get a ground wire from the bridge post into the control cavity. And as you can see, that's not a very long distance at all, but it's a very awkward way to have to drill, because you have to drill from inside the hole, because the wire comes out inside that hole, and then the insert is pressed down in it, making contact and grounding the strings to the other end of the wire that runs to the circuit. Okay, so I've got two to run, one from here into here, and then one from here into here. Now, once again, it's a really small hole because it's usually just a 18, 20, or 24 gauge wire, so it's not that thick. And generally speaking, smaller sized drill bits are shorter in length. So this is a little trick for you. What I like to do is take a piece of coat hanger wire, and then I cut extreme edges to the end. In other words, rather than cut it this way, what I like to do is almost cut it at a 60-degree angle, right there at the tip. and just kind of shave it off. And what you want is an irregular point, one with rough edges, because that is the drill flutes, so to speak. So what you want to do is just stick this into your drill chuck. You know, it'll warble around and whatever, but that's not the problem. Okay, now what we're going to do is fix this firmly into the side of the hole down there that we've already drilled, and then we're just going to gently now this is drilling very slowly, but it's making progress, especially with this Purpleheart, which is a really hard wood. There we go. Just drilled a tiny little hole that big diagonally through the inside of that hole we just drilled with a piece of coat hanger wire. Now I'll flip this around and I'll do the other side the same way. And then that is everything routed, wiring channels cut and drilled, and we are almost ready to assemble, but we got to finish it first. Part of being a professional when you're building guitars is taking care of the small details, because it's all in the small details. One thing I really like to do is completely shield my control cavities. So I've got a roll of this 3M HVAC ductwork tape. This is beautiful stuff. It's really thin. It's only coated on one side, and the glue on it's really thin too, but it sticks extremely well. And what I've done, this cavity is 1 1/8 inch deep, and I've cut a strip 1 1/8 inch, and then I'm going to lay this on the inside of the cavity here, and then I'll pull the tape, and then the sides will be lined. Now remember, we've already constructed aluminum bottoms, so to speak, for the solid aluminum bottoms as a grounding shield, and these will make contact with that and should be a perfect shield continuity. And then we've of course taken the ebony control cavity tops and gone ahead and done that as well. So all I'm doing right now is just doing a mock fit up, making my bends and curves and making sure everything fits in perfectly. And I've still got some to trim off this end here. You know, always go long and cut short, so to speak. You can always trim some off, but you can't always add some on. So I think we were about there right now. Let's check this again just one last time to make sure that the fit's in. Yep, there it is. These are the tuners for both headstocks. That's a lot of tuners. That's 3 normal headstocks worth of tuners there. So I've unpackaged all of these, but this is more of another type of issue here. You have 18 packets, each with 3 individual components: a flat washer, a threaded collar, and a small Phillips head screw to attach the tuner in the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this little small compartment box, and I'm going to go through this whole pile here and sort them all out into that. And then that way, when it comes time to install these, it'll be a lot easier to get to the individual pieces. I'm going to apply the decals now for the headstocks using my own logo. These are printed out on decal paper, and then they are sprayed with lacquer to seal the ink in, and then slide that up into position. Right there. They've got glue on the backs. So what I like to do is just take a cloth, or in this case my shirt, and just press them down into place. Allow these plenty of time to properly dry. And then what we'll do is coat them with lacquer on the headstocks to seal them in and keep them on. But there's the 2 logos. Pretty much the way I wanted them. Slight tilt on the HK, right in the middle, no tuner impingement, anything like that. We're golden. Now that we're putting hardware on the instrument body, it's time to deal with the tuners. Now, everyone knows that when you have a 12-string headstock and you have 12 tuners on there, that's a lot of weight and it can end up having a neck dive. When you add 2 necks to one instrument with 18 metal tuners at the end, that's a lot of metal at the end and a lot of counterweight that tends to make a neck dive. I found these really cool tuners at MGB guitars, and they're an open ring tuner. And that means that there's all that metal in the middle of the button that's just not there. It's just a hollow ring on the button. And so it saves, maybe an ounce per tuner, but over 18 tuners, that can be up to a pound of weight that you don't have to compensate for on your design and neck dave. I just thought these were just a fantastic design, and so when I saw them on MGB, I said, you know what, this is going to be the perfect tuner for this 12-string, 6-string double neck, because we're really trying to keep the weight down on that end of the instrument. So what I'm going to do now is take all 18 and put them into position, line them up properly, and then mount them with the retaining collars on the front, flip it over, and then we'll line up the screw holes on the back so that every tuner is perfectly parallel to each other in plane. And then we'll go ahead and screw them on, and then we're almost there. And there you go. Now we just got to take the screws and put each one in there. This is a magnetized tip, which means picking out each individual screw is pretty easy to do. So you just put this on the end of the screw magnetically, and then you can feed it directly into the hole. Snug it down, don't over tighten it. Just make sure. The purpose of the screw is to keep the tuner body from rotating while you're tuning or while it's got string tension on it. And you just keep grabbing this and repeat this another 11 times. Sorry about it, the birds are singing outside. What I've been doing is gently heating up this area around the nut. The nut that came with the neck through blank is plastic, and I intend to replace that with something of bone, which to me is a more durable, better sounding material. There's nothing wrong with a plastic nut, but I'm going to go ahead and replace it anyway. So I've heated this up. It's a bit warm to the touch here, but then I'm going to take some flat pliers. These are ground flat, smooth on the ends, so that they'll lay flush with the cutting edge against a surface. And I'm gently going to clamp this right at the base of the rosewood, and then I'm going to rotate my wrist slightly to the right. I'm not going to pull straight up. I'm just going to rotate, move it down, rotate, move it down. There it goes. And you'll feel it pop and it releases. And then just keep working it, and all of a sudden it's out. You haven't pulled up any rosewood chips, hopefully, but if you do, they're very easy to fix. If they're large enough, save the chip. You can place it back in the spot where it was with some water-thin super glue, press it down in place, let that cure, dry, and then flat sand it smooth again. Or in this case, there are no chips. I've just got a little bit of raised edge along the cut there, so I'll clean the cut out, make sure there's no glue remaining, and then we've got this replacement foam nut that's already pre-cut. Pretty nice just to slip it back in. But let's get that cut cleaned up first and make sure there's no chunks of glue or any wood or anything preventing this from seating firmly in the slot here, and then we'll just work from there. So we've got the edges of the nut slot cut, and I like to take a razor blade and set it inside the slot and just lightly burnish the bottom. That helps remove any existing glue clumps or pieces of wood without losing the making it not square. If you use a file, you tend to file more in the middle than on the edges. This will work all the way to the edges. Then when you've got your pre-cut nut, these don't always fit exactly, and what I mean by that is the nut width can vary from guitar to guitar. So what you want to do is position your nut slot, your nut in the slot so that you've got equal distance from the strings on the outside. The both E strings are equidistant in, okay? So if you've got a little bit of overhang, you can always file the ends, or sand the ends rather. I use a piece of 400 grit paper, and you want to work very, very conservatively here. Okay, and just keep test fitting back and forth, sliding the nut in and out until you've got it's completely flat and level. I like to take like a razor blade or something like that and then use that as a stop edge. So I know that that is completely flush, and then I feel the other end and I feel like I've got just a little bit more of a an edge to go on fitting this widthwise. You don't want it overhanging. It wants to be completely flush with the side of the guitar neck itself. Okay. So there's a couple more little bits in hundredths, thousandths of a millimeter, whatever you want to say. It's taken off the end, and then place it back in the slot. Use your razor blade as a stop. Push the nuts all the way to the end of the slot so that it's flush here, and keep checking. We're almost there, got a little bit more to go on this side. And you keep back and forth, back and forth. And then I'll show you what to do when you get it to the point where you're ready to glue it in, because we're going to use some water-thin super glue, and we're just going to wick it in gently. 1 or 2 drops is all it requires. String pressure holds the nut in for the most part. You just don't want it sliding side to side. So we'll take a razor blade, hold it flat against the end of the nut slot here, push the nut so that it's all the way seated forward, and check our fit again. You want to feel down from the top of the nut as well. Now this is a fret hammer from MGB Guitars. It's wonderful for making small adjustments like that without denting anything. It's got non-mar surface here, and then it's got a rubber low impact surface on this side. And we'll also use that when we start doing some fret work here. But what I like to do is just use it as a adjustment tool. You can use it to seat in the top of your frets. It won't leave any marring, any residue, anything like that. It's a really neat little tool, and they've got a great price on this. So check on MGB's guitar site for this. So I've still got just a tiny little bit left on this end. Got the slot cleaned out. Got the nut, pre-cut nut width completely sanded perfectly. We're going to slide it in place. I'm going to use this razor blade as a stop here on the edge. We're going to push that forward so that's flush. And this is too. Might get a little tap right here. There, I like that. Good fit. Now I'm going to take a single drop of water-thin super glue and just run it down the edge there.